Jack treasured his solitude until they came. Again. His private pool, once a sanctuary, had become a playground for entitled strangers. This time, he wouldn't just evict them. He'd make sure they never returned. Jack had always enjoyed the quiet solitude of his home. Nestled in the outskirts of town, his property was his personal oasis, away from the chaos of city life, away from nosy neighbors, and most importantly, away from entitled strangers. His backyard was his pride and joy, a pristine space with a crystal-clear pool that he had spent years perfecting. It was meant to be a place of relaxation, a retreat from the world, but that peace had been shattered too many times before. On this particular morning, Jack woke up to a sound he had learned to despise. Loud, bass-heavy music rattling his windows. The kind of music that didn't just demand attention but forcefully seized it. He frowned, rubbing his eyes, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he was still dreaming. But as the muffled sounds of laughter, splashes, and drunken cheers reached his ears, his stomach sank. He threw on a pair of jeans, shoved his feet into his boots, and stormed toward the back door. The moment he stepped outside, the sight before him made his blood boil. His private backyard had been transformed into the scene of a massive pool party. Lounge chairs had been dragged across his patio. Coolers full of alcohol were scattered around the deck. And an inflatable bar had been set up near the deep end of his pool. Dozens of people, complete strangers, were lounging in his chairs, dipping their feet in the water, or floating on enormous, inflatable swans. Some were even grilling food on a makeshift barbecue station, using his expensive outdoor kitchen as if they had every right to be there. His jaw clenched as he scanned the chaos. How had they even gotten in? The gate was supposed to be locked. And then, as if the situation couldn't get any worse, she appeared. Karen. She stood at the center of it all, perched elegantly on a pink flamingo float, sipping from a cocktail glass, like she was the queen of some exclusive resort. Platinum blonde hair, oversized designer sunglasses, a smug smirk that screamed entitlement. Karen was everything Jack had come to despise. She wasn't just some random intruder. No, she had done this before, several times. Every summer, she and her so-called friends somehow found their way onto his property, acting as if it were their own private vacation spot. And every year he had to deal with the same headache of throwing them out. Jack stormed toward the pool, his fists clenching at his sides. "Karen!" His voice cut through the noise, but only a few heads turned in his direction. Most people were too busy taking selfies or clinking their drinks together to acknowledge him. Karen, however, casually glanced over her sunglasses and grinned. "Oh, hey there, Jack. Didn't see you there." She waved lazily, not even bothering to sit up. Jack's patience was already wearing thin. "What the hell is going on here?" She rolled her eyes, as if he were the one being unreasonable. "Relax, farm boy," she said, taking another slow sip of her drink. "We're just having a little fun. It's such a beautiful pool, and it was just sitting here empty. It would be a shame not to use it." His grip tightened. "This is my property. You and your friends need to leave. Now." Karen let out a dramatic sigh, tilting her head back. "God, you're so uptight." "It's just water, Jack. No one's getting hurt. Look, everyone's having a great time. You should join us." She gestured toward the party with a careless flick of her hand, as if that would somehow convince him to be okay with this blatant trespassing. Jack took a step closer, his voice lowering. "This isn't up for debate. Get out before I call the cops." Karen let out a laugh. Loud, mocking, condescending. "Oh, Jack, come on. We both know you're not going to do that. You said the same thing last year, and yet here we are again. What are you going to do, huh? Fight a bunch of innocent people just trying to enjoy the summer?" A few of her friends chuckled, some even booing at him like he was the villain in some ridiculous drama. Jack could feel his blood pressure rising, his muscles tensing as he fought the urge to start tossing people out himself. Then, as if she wasn't already insufferable enough, Karen took it a step further. She lifted her phone, aimed it at him, and smirked. "Say hi to the internet, Jack. Let's show everyone how our favorite grumpy neighbor reacts to a little summer fun." Jack froze. His eyes flicked to the screen of her phone, realizing exactly what she was doing. She was trying to turn this into a spectacle. If he lost his temper now, she'd spin the narrative however she wanted. He'd be the villain, the bitter, angry man who couldn't handle a few people enjoying a pool. A slow, calculated breath filled his lungs. Number. He wasn't going to play her game. He wasn't going to be the fool in her little show. Instead, he smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "All right, Karen," he said calmly, his voice even. "Have your fun. Enjoy the pool while you can." Karen raised an eyebrow, as if she hadn't expected that response. "Oh? Finally learning to loosen up, are we?" Jack didn't answer. He simply turned on his heel and walked away, ignoring the jeering laughter and the clinking of drinks behind him. Let them think they had won. Let them think he had surrendered. Because this time, Jack wasn't just going to kick them out. He was going to make sure they never came back. Jack stormed back into his house. His jaw clenched so tightly it felt like his teeth might crack. He wasn't just angry. He was seething. This had gone beyond simple trespassing. Karen and her group had turned his private property into their personal vacation spot, ignoring his warnings, mocking him in his own home. And now she was filming him, trying to paint him as some bitter old man who couldn't handle a little fun. No, this time he wasn't going to argue, wasn't going to waste his breath on threats. This time, he was going to make sure that Karen and her freeloading entourage never dared set foot in his backyard again. But it had to be something big, something unforgettable. Jack paced his living room, his mind racing with possibilities. Calling the cops would take too long, and knowing Karen, she'd spin the situation in her favor. He needed a plan, one that would hit them where it hurt. Then his eyes drifted toward the large glass window overlooking the pool, where he could still see Karen lounging on her ridiculous pink flamingo float, sipping her drink like she owned the place. His pool. A slow smirk curled at the edge of his lips. Oh, he had an idea. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the right name. Mike. If there was anyone who would be down for some well-planned chaos, it was him. Jack hit call, and after 2 rings, his friend picked up. "Jack?" Mike's voice was slightly groggy, like he had just woken up. "What's up? You never call unless something's on fire." Jack exhaled sharply, still watching the party unfold through his window. "Not yet, but I need your help with something." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Let me guess. Karen?" Jack's smirk widened. "She broke in again? Threw a full-on pool party in my backyard?" Mike let out a whistle. "Damn! She's got balls. I'll give her that." "So what's the plan? You finally ready to go nuclear?" Jack glanced at his watch. If they moved fast, they could set everything up before sunset. "How fast can you get to my place?" 10 minutes, Mike said immediately. "What are we doing?" Jack leaned against the wall, his smirk turning into a full-blown grin. "We're getting some fish. Big fish." By the time Mike arrived, Jack had already made a few calls. He knew a guy, an old acquaintance from the local fishery who specialized in koi and large freshwater fish. Not just the elegant, delicate kind that people kept in small decorative ponds. No, Jack was looking for giant koi, the kind that could grow over 3 feet long and weigh over 30 pounds. The kind that, if introduced into a pool, would make anyone think twice before jumping in. Mike parked his truck in the driveway and hopped out, eyeing Jack with an amused expression. "You're serious about this, huh?" Jack nodded, dead serious. They drove out to a nearby fish farm on the edge of town, where Jack's contact had already prepared their order. When the man pulled back the tarp covering the large transport tanks, Mike let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Jack, these things are huge!" Inside the tanks, 40 massive koi swam in slow, deliberate circles. Some were golden, others deep orange and white, but all of them were large enough to give anyone second thoughts about stepping into the water with them. "These'll do," Jack said, handing over the cash. An hour later, they pulled into Jack's driveway, the transport tanks carefully secured in the truck bed. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the chaotic mess still unfolding in his backyard. Jack cracked his knuckles. "All right, let's get to work." By the time they were done, 40 massive koi had been released into the pool. The water was still crystal clear, but beneath the surface, an army of giant fish now glided silently, waiting for the inevitable moment when the uninvited guests would return. Jack leaned against the pool railing, watching the fish adjust to their new home. "Tomorrow," he said, a quiet satisfaction in his voice, "they're going to regret ever stepping foot in my backyard." The next afternoon, Jack stood by his kitchen window, arms crossed, watching as the inevitable happened. Karen and her swarm of freeloaders returned, pouring through his backyard as if they owned the place. Someone had the audacity to kick open the gate this time. No sneaking. No pretense, just blatant disregard for private property. Coolers were hauled in, bottles of expensive liquor cracked open, and within minutes, the music was blaring again, drowning out the peaceful hum of the late summer afternoon. People flopped onto lounge chairs, feet dipped into the pool, laughter echoing across the yard. Jack spotted Karen at the center of it all, sprawled across an oversized, inflatable unicorn, drink in hand, acting as if this was some kind of high-end resort. Perfect. Jack let them settle in, let them get comfortable. He waited as the first few partygoers cannonballed into the water, oblivious to the 40 massive koi lurking beneath the surface. He could already tell when the first person felt it. A girl in a red bikini shrieked mid-laugh, jerking her legs up onto her float. "Something touched me!" Her friend, a guy lazily floating nearby, rolled his eyes. "It's a pool, Emily, not a swamp. Relax." Jack leaned against the doorframe, suppressing a grin. "Oh, just wait." The koi, disturbed by the sudden activity, began moving. At first it was slow, shadows gliding beneath the water, brushing against legs, slipping through clusters of swimmers. Then, one of the larger ones, a golden beast nearly 3 feet long, darted up from the depths. It bumped into someone. The resulting scream cut through the music like a blade. The pool exploded into chaos. People thrashed, scrambling for the edges as more koi surfaced, their massive bodies shifting the water in unnatural waves. The once pristine, peaceful pool had turned into a writhing mass of terrified swimmers, desperately trying to escape something they couldn't even comprehend. A guy near the deep end flailed wildly, kicking at the water. "Oh my God, it's a giant fish! What the hell?" Another girl clawed at the ledge, her nails scraping against the tiles as she hoisted herself up. "There's more! They're everywhere!" The koi, spooked by the sudden movement, frenzied. They surged toward the surface in a shimmering, chaotic swirl, bumping into bodies, their smooth, heavy scales gliding against unsuspecting skin. People were shouting, pushing, scrambling over one another to escape, drinks and sunglasses sinking beneath the water. Then came the moment Jack had been waiting for. Karen, still lounging on her inflatable unicorn, had been watching the chaos with growing irritation. Unlike the others, she hadn't gotten into the pool, her inflated throne keeping her above the terror below, or at least it had. A massive white and orange koi surfaced just beneath her, its powerful tail slicing through the water. It nudged the unicorn, tipping it slightly. Karen wobbled, scowling. "Oh, for God's sake, you people are—" Then another koi hit her float. This time it tipped violently to the side. Karen's drink went flying. Her sunglasses tumbled into the water. And before she could even process what was happening, she was plunged straight into the chaos. The moment she hit the water, she screamed, a high-pitched, panicked wail that only made things worse. "Get me out! Get me out right now!" She thrashed wildly, but the koi, confused by the sudden movement, swarmed around her. Their slick, heavy bodies brushed against her legs, arms, back. And in her hysteria, she became convinced she was being attacked. A guy at the edge of the pool tried to help. "Karen! They're trying to kill me!" she screeched, flailing so violently that she accidentally kicked another partygoer in the face. By now, nearly everyone had either scrambled onto the deck or was desperately trying to climb out of the water, leaving Karen alone in her watery nightmare. Jack, standing with arms crossed on the patio, let out a satisfied breath. Now, this was a party he could enjoy. Karen's screams pierced the air, shrill and panicked, as she flailed in the water, desperately trying to escape what she believed was a full-scale aquatic assault. The giant koi, completely oblivious to the chaos they had caused, continued gliding through the mother pool, their large, sleek bodies brushing against her arms and legs. To Karen, however, every gentle nudge felt like an attack, every shadow beneath her a monstrous creature waiting to drag her under. She thrashed wildly, splashing water in every direction, her drenched blonde hair clinging to her face in tangled strands. "Somebody help me!" she shrieked, her voice cracking as she clawed at the edge of the pool, struggling to haul herself out. But her so-called friends, they were too busy laughing. The moment Karen had gone under, the fear that had gripped the party began to shift. The initial screams turned into nervous chuckles, then outright hysterics, as people realized what had actually happened. "Oh, my God!" A guy near the deck gasped between laughs, doubling over. "They're just fish!" Another girl, still dripping wet and shaking from the initial panic, cackled. "I thought it was piranhas or something, but look at her!" Karen, red-faced and seething, finally managed to grip the ledge, but as she tried to pull herself up, her wet hands slipped. She let out another shriek, her arms flailing, and with a loud splash, she went right back into the water. The laughter around the pool exploded. Phones were out now, people recording every second of her humiliation, zooming in on her furious, soaked expression, capturing the exact moment the queen of the party became the joke. Karen resurfaced, livid. "Stop filming me!" she screeched, splashing wildly at the crowd. "This isn't funny!" But it was. Even her closest friends had turned on her now, snickering, whispering to each other. Some were already packing up their things, realizing the party was over. The whole reason they had come was because Karen had convinced them she had some sort of claim to this place, that Jack was some pushover who would never do anything about it. Clearly, she had miscalculated. And then Jack stepped forward. Karen's furious gaze snapped toward him, her teeth gritted as she shoved herself up onto the deck, finally dragging herself out of the koi-infested water. She stood there, soaked, shivering, mascara streaking down her face, her once perfect swimsuit dripping onto the patio, Jack took his time walking over. He didn't need to yell. Didn't need to gloat. He just looked at her. And then, with the calmest voice imaginable, he said, "So, still think the pool was yours?" Karen's face twisted with rage. "You think this is funny?" she screeched. You put fish in your own pool just to get back at me?" Jack shrugged. "It's my property. I can do whatever I want with it." Karen opened her mouth, ready to unleash another entitled rant, until she noticed something. The police sirens. Her face went pale as 2 squad cars rolled into the driveway. The crowd fell silent. A few people muttered to each other before grabbing their things and bolting for the exit. Others just stood frozen, wide-eyed as 2 uniformed officers stepped out of their vehicles, their expressions already annoyed. One of the cops, Officer Graham, adjusted his belt and surveyed the scene. Half-dressed, drunk partygoers, a pool filled with fish, and Karen standing there like a drowned rat. "Jack," Officer Graham sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "What the hell is happening this time?" Jack crossed his arms. "Same thing as last year. They broke in, had a party, again." The officer exhaled sharply. He turned to Karen, his expression unimpressed. "Is that true?" Karen sputtered, her hands flailing. He's lying. We thought the pool was public." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he pulled up the security footage. The video played loud and clear. Karen, just an hour earlier, kicking open the gate. Karen, laughing about how Jack was too much of a coward to stop them. Karen, mocking him to his face. The officers watched in silence. Then, Officer Graham sighed. "Well, that makes this easy." He turned back to Karen. "Congratulations. You and your friends are all getting trespassing fines." Karen gasped. "What?" The cop pulled out his notepad. "And since you damaged private property," he continued, nodding toward the broken gate, "you're getting an additional fine for vandalism. Oh, and public disturbance, since I'm sure Jack's neighbors weren't thrilled about your music blasting all day." Karen's mouth opened and closed, completely speechless. Meanwhile, her friends were backing away, muttering things like, "I didn't even want to come," and "Karen said it was fine, I swear." One by one, they abandoned her. By the time the cops started handing out fines, Karen stood alone, soaked and humiliated, shaking with rage and disbelief. Jack simply smiled. She wasn't laughing anymore. Karen stood there, soaked and shivering, watching as her so-called friends scattered like roaches, eager to escape before the police could add their names to the list of citations. The party that had once been a scene of laughter, drinks, and carefree indulgence had been reduced to a pathetic mess of abandoned coolers, overturned chairs, and a pool filled with 40 giant koi lazily gliding through the water. Officer Graham flipped his notepad shut, his expression impassive. "All right, Karen," he said. "You've got 2 choices. You can either accept your fines and leave quietly, or I can arrest you for trespassing and destruction of property. Your call." Karen's face turned a violent shade of red. "This is ridiculous!" she shrieked, fists clenching at her sides. "He set me up! This is entrapment!" Jack exhaled through his nose, barely restraining a smirk. "So, you're saying I forced you to break into my backyard? Forced you to throw yourself into my pool? Forced you to kick open my gate?" Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She was cornered, and she knew it. The crowd that had once adored her was now watching her fall apart. Some stood at the edges of the yard, murmuring amongst themselves. Others had their phones still out, recording every second of her meltdown. Whatever influence she had held over them had crumbled, replaced by open amusement or outright disdain. And then, just when Karen thought her humiliation couldn't get any worse, Officer Graham gestured to the mess left behind. "You and your friends trashed this place," he said, "which means you're also responsible for cleaning it up." Karen's eyes widened. "What? No way, I'm not." "You can either start picking up every single can, bottle, and wrapper right now, or I can add an additional fine for littering, maybe even community service." Jack saw the exact moment she realized she had no way out. Her shoulders slumped, her breath came in furious gasps, but the fight was gone. The reality of the situation had finally caught up to her. There was no charming her way out of this, no smug retort that would undo the damage. With gritted teeth, Karen bent down, picked up an empty beer can, and chucked it into the nearest trash bag. Jack leaned against the railing, arms crossed, watching with deep satisfaction as the woman who had mocked him was now cleaning up after herself like a scolded child. The once proud queen of the pool party was now knee-deep in her own disgrace. As she worked, her former friends made pathetic attempts to distance themselves. "Hey, I barely drank anything," one guy muttered to the officer. "Can I just go?" Officer Graham didn't even look up. "You're on private property. You leave when Jack says you leave." Jack smirked, enjoying the sudden shift in power. "Feel free to stay and help Karen," he said, his tone casual. "The faster you clean up, the faster you all leave." None of them volunteered. Slowly, begrudgingly, Karen and the few unlucky souls still left behind picked up every piece of trash, every empty cup, every soaked napkin. The entire time, Jack stood back and watched. By the time the yard was spotless, the koi pool still rippling from the earlier chaos, Karen looked defeated. Her once perfect hair was matted, her designer swimsuit streaked with grime, and her pride completely shattered. Jack took one last step forward, looking down at her. "Next time, Karen," he said, voice calm but firm. "Maybe ask permission before throwing a party at someone else's house." Her nostrils flared, pure venom in her gaze. But she didn't say anything. She couldn't. Not when the evidence was stacked against her. Not when everyone was watching, waiting for her final downfall. She turned on her heel, stomped toward her car, and slammed the door shut. The moment she peeled out of the driveway, tires kicking up dust, Mike, who had been silently watching from the porch, finally let out a low whistle. "That," he said, clapping Jack on the back, "was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen." Jack exhaled, taking in the peaceful silence that had returned to his backyard. No music, no drunk idiots, no Karen, and best of all, no more uninvited guests. His gaze drifted to the koi still circling lazily in the pool, the golden and white bodies gracefully gliding beneath the surface. Mike chuckled. "So, you ever gonna get rid of those fish?" Jack smirked. "Maybe."